Let's now move on and hear from Dr. Wole Fatunbi that helped us putting together this event. Wole is the Senior Technical Cluster Leader for Innovation Systems and Partnerships at FARA. He has over 20 years professional work experience leading the strategic development and implementation of various research and development initiatives, applying his expertise in farming systems and soil fertility. So over to you, Wole.
Okay, thank you very much, Pedro. A moment, just want to. Okay, yes, thank you, Pedro, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us for this important webinar. Well, as introduced, I will be speaking to this team, Essentials of the African Manifesto on Forgotten Food, and I intend to just address three important segments of the subject matter. I mean, the question that I have faced over time, and I've heard from many of you, is why is the forgotten food important in Africa? And I want to say, just like Pedro mentioned briefly, that forgotten food is synonymous to neglected food, underutilized food, indigenous food, orphan crops, and future foods. Those are the labels that you find on the lips of technocrats around this subject. But we choose to use forgotten food. And someone asked me, forgotten food and forgotten by who? Forgotten by who? And I want to say what we mean is that these commodities, they are barely improved. You find them with the farmers, they are barely improved by research system because they lack attention and investment, and that's why we term them forgotten. But they are important in Africa because they find a big use within the cultural system in Africa. In fact, many of them are known to have to be dense in nutrients, so they are highly nutritious. Some of them are known to be resilient to climate change, and they are well adapted to the landscape. I want to say that these commodities are important. Just to build on what has been said, also over 300,000 crop commodities are known, but only 4 is used prominently, and the 4 also take more than 60% of the research investment. So the other commodities, they are just there in lay-by condition. But for the issues of food and nutritional security, we need to begin to think outside the box and bring in these commodities that are well adapted to the different agroecology. In sub-Saharan Africa, you know that there's a popular data, more than 20% of the 1.2 billion people in this sub-region were undernourished. I mean, someone said, in a place where people are suffering from hunger and undernourishment, how do you call some food forgotten? How do you call some food underutilized? And this calls for attention. We need to go back to this commodity and find ways to fix them back into our food system. Let me say that there has been some slight attention around this subject matter for more than a decade, but it has not gained the type of attention it's beginning to gain since the year 2021, when the United Nations system came up with this food system, change in the food system. And like Agri said, FARA tagged on with our global body, the GFA, and we began to work on this commodity. Now, I want to use this illustration to just show that a number of the forgotten food commodities find their origin in Africa. I mean, 46% of this commodity have their origin in Africa. And like we have said, they are rich and dense in nutrients. When we put this data together in 2021, we had to form a community of practice in Africa made up of about 570 individuals or technocrats that are involved in forgotten food in Africa. And we began to work together. In fact, we jointly developed the African Manifesto. The African Manifesto with manifesto from other continents feeding into the Global Manifesto and the Global Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, Global Forum, I mean, it works at the global level, is working on ensuring that the Global Manifesto find its traction. And FARA and its stakeholders, we are also working strongly to ensure that the African Manifesto that addresses the unique circumstances of forgotten food in Africa also find its implementation. Within the African Manifesto and Plan of Action for Forgotten Food, there are 5 key pillars. And the first of this pillar is we realize that we need to quickly establish a functional research and innovation system for holistic development of forgotten food. What we're saying is that we need to come up with a continental research system that is dedicated to forgotten food. And this is really, really very vital. The coordination of this research system also needs to be coherent. And then in our consultation, bulk of the stakeholders still feels that it should follow the conventional style in Africa, where FARA coordinates at the continental level, the sub-regional organization, and the national agricultural research system. This is not going to cut out the CGIAR system and other international agricultural research centers that are working in Africa. But more importantly is a component of this research system. You know, the research system we need to run and do an identification and characterization of forgotten food. There are many, okay, in Africa. A handful has been identified and there is slight documentation, but we need to explore all so that we can prioritize and give attention to those with potentials to actually transform our food system. Then major part of this research system is this breathing and agronomic improvement of this forgotten food. I think in the chat, I saw someone raise a question. What are the barriers for mainstreaming the forgotten food? Yeah, there are a number of barriers, and establishing a research system will help us to do that. We also think strongly around the development of the seed system. Now, the second pillar is to build an innovation environment. When we say innovation environment here, we think about knowledge. We think and the enablers of knowledge that translate knowledge and technologies into social and economic benefit. And we need to create such environment. To do that, we need to do broad-based engagement of the community. We need to engage the different stakeholders, the producers, the end users, and ensure that we jointly work together to develop this integration and utilization of the commodity. We need to bring in stakeholders like the policymaker for infrastructural development, and we need to do a lot more on advocacy and policy development. The third pillar is the establishment of partnership and strategic alliances, and I think one of it is this. But within Africa, we're thinking strongly of engagement of youth and women participation in this process. Then we are thinking of establishing functional innovation platform at the strategic and operational level for technology development, utilization, processing, commercialization, and all other things that may be required. But more importantly, we are looking at developing intercontinental partnership with other research systems. And I want to say that this is one of it. I mean, it's the beginning of it, but it is one important step to link up with the researchers that are working on forgotten food, organization involving forgotten food in the United Kingdom, as well as other parts of the world. What comes to mind strongly is the South-South partnership, South-North-South partnership, you know, the tripartite partnership that is prominent for technology generation and utilization at the global level. The fourth pillar is the facilitation of engagement of the private sector. And this boils down to the issues of investment around production, processing, packaging, and marketing. You know, we need to create structured engagement. We need to open up market, facilitate access to market for the short chain supply, and create alternative retail. And this is a vital pillar to ensure that forgotten food got mainstream into the system. And the last pillar here is to create a regional pool of financial resources to support research and coherent development effort. Well, within Africa, we need to develop a funding mechanism for research and development. You agree with me that research and development takes a lot of effort and it takes time. But for forgotten food, we need to build on existing platforms and quickly start by harvesting the low-hanging fruits while we'll invest into long-term related issue. We also need to develop alliance with funders and donors. Of course, there's a level of interest in forgotten food, but the interest is growing and we need to catch up with the momentum and get it going. So this constitutes the 5 pillars in our manifesto. But this manifesto also have this component around its action plan. And I want to say that there are 12 action plans, but let me just pick a few out of these. You can always get the details of this in the Forgotten Food Manifesto, which is available in the cyberspace already. Google it, then you get it and you are able to download it. But we want to say that we need to start with awareness raising for the value of forgotten food in our society. I mean, you agree with me, for more than 5 decades, we've been rigmaroling around these 4 to 6 commodities. And then, I mean, the children in school today and people that are harder today, they don't know about forgotten foods at all. So we need to begin to do awareness raising and get them to see the value in it so that we change the label. I mean, there are some that look at it as the food for the poor. We need to change that label. Then we need to create this novel research program and networking. We need to come up strongly with participating plant breeding program. We need to come up with sustainable seed system. We need to promote collection and conservation of genetic resources and germplasm development. And I want to emphasize that also we need to look at food and nutritional analysis, because a number of these forgotten food may have anti-nutritional factor that needs to be removed through processing and preparation. Then we need to begin to work on markets and related issues. I put this illustration together just to show the research and innovation framework that we have at the back of our mind for the forgotten food in Africa. You look at the right leg, the research network we need is plant breeding, agronomy, seed system, policy, and economics. Of course, other research networks are important, like food processing and development of new commodities. But the research around gender and youth also we find is placement. So we need to think about communication and knowledge management, capacity building, stakeholders engagement, policy, and advocacy. And the outcome of it will be business development, value chain development, market, and release of new products into the market. Now, we have keen in this webinar about the breeding, learning from the breeder, from the conventional and new approaches that we can use. I want to say that the key priority for breeding of forgotten foods in all our discussion in Africa over time should be around domestication of this forgotten food. I mean, I'm talking about sustainable propagation technique, seed system development. Then we move to the issues of yield improvement. because some of these forgotten food, they are still in their rudimentary stage, and we are harvesting from the wild. We need to talk about yield improvement, then adaptation of some of these commodities to marginal, adaptation to marginal condition, improvement of nutritional quality, and processing quality. These are the key priorities that our plant breeders and biotechnologists should take up as it relates to the issue of forgotten food. Now, the CGIAR Center, especially the Alliance of Biodiversity, has been promoting participative plant breeding for improved adaptation. We think strongly that participatory plant breeding will be the best approach, but I leave that to the plant breeder to discuss in this webinar, if this is the only approach or it should be one of the approaches, because we think that this puts farmers at the center of the breeding activities. It will ensure multi-stakeholders engagement. It helps set the right breeding objective and joint generation of genetic variability. Then it enhances the use of traditional knowledge. If all these points are very important, then it should form an essential part of our breeding technique. But I leave it to our presenters to bring this up for our discussion today. Let me conclude quickly by saying that forgotten food constitutes a strong bedrock of the diversity in traditional and indigenous food system. We know that in Africa already, and some of these food, they are used, they are part of our cultural food systems, and we value them a lot, though it's waning down, but we value them. And then it is important to collate and document local knowledge around this food, and we should also identify the traditional beliefs for their utilization. This will help us to quickly come up with appropriate agronomic practices. In fact, this information, it will be useful for product development and awareness raising. Then we must shape food system to deliver food, safe, affordable, and nutritional diets in Africa. We believe that it is time to run this action. We believe that if all hands is on deck and we run this action quickly, in the next couple of years, possibly within 1 decade, we should be able to deal completely, eradicate the issue of food and nutritional insecurity in Africa. I want to thank you very much for listening to me, and I hand over back to Pedro. Thanks.